So for now, please listen in and enjoy. Gulin, I am very excited to be speaking with you today. I want to welcome you to Counting Countries, and I'm hoping you can take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Gülin, and I'm Turkish by birth, Italian by marriage, and I have a master's of mechanical engineering by education. But I don't define myself with any of these. I am a traveler, reader, and writer, and I've done 3 round-the-world tours, one by land, one by sea, and one with my family. And now I have this mission to go to every country to burn my passports in the end.
Okay, there's a lot of cliffhangers there and a lot for us to talk about. But let's just jump in. I want to learn a little bit more. You said you were born in Turkey. Tell me about growing up, and more specifically, tell me about your relationship with travel growing up in your family and growing up in Turkey and all that.
My family traveled around in Turkey, but I'm coming from a broken family, and my parents were divorced when I was a teenager. So I had to deal with a lot of family problems, and I didn't really get to travel much. It was only at university that I could think of traveling at all. And we booked this trip with the university. And then my mother only allowed me to go in the case that my brother would be coming along with me. And he didn't go to pick up his passport, so we just couldn't go on that trip. And that was that. So only after I graduated university and I started doing my master's, and I became a teaching assistant, and I started making money. When I first made a bit of money, I just went into horseback riding because I loved horses. And then I had some more money. And then what do you do with the money? And I said, okay, I want to travel with this money. So I booked a trip to Egypt. And that was my first travel.
Excellent. So I want to know about that first attempted travel with your brother. Going from what I know about you, you're a strong-willed, independent person. What were your thoughts when your mother forced you to go on a trip with your brother, didn't let you travel independently? And then what were your thoughts when your brother wasn't too motivated, didn't even bother getting the passport, and you were forced to skip that trip? What's going on in your mind at that point?
I actually am not. I mean, I believe I am strong-minded and independent person, but at that point I wasn't. And I still am too traditional and would like to belong to a society and at least be accepted with my family. So at that point, it was fine that I could go. I would be going with my brother as long as I could go. But of course, I was disappointed when my brother didn't bother waking up to go to pick up his passport, and it was to be cancelled. I mean, it's just. But what can you do? That's what the family situation was in. So I accepted the situation.
Okay, so then you were in the Masters, you had some extra money, and then you planned and went on your first international trip. Where was that?
Egypt.
Okay, and what was it like as a young 20-year-old something traveling overseas for your first time and visiting Egypt?
It was actually very nice. I had booked this tour it was June. Of course, it was after the school went on vacation. And they said, okay, this is the last tour until September because it's too hot to travel to Egypt. And I was the only young person. I'm the youngest person in the tour group. And I was just so excited when we went into I think it was the Sheraton, and I overlooked the Nile from the balcony of my room. I actually jumped up and down with joy because it was just so... I mean, I couldn't believe it. And I was just thinking, because it's going to be too hot, I just had all light stuff and I just had one jumper on me. And I realized it's so cold because everywhere they turn on the air condition. It was a very nice trip. It was I mean, Egypt has a special place in my life anyway, because it's the country that I think I've been to most. And it's the country that I met my husband as well.
Oh, okay. So some very good memories.
Yeah.
So besides meeting your husband in Egypt, what is the best thing about Egypt, or the most beautiful thing, or?
I mean, I think what I like in Egypt, the thing is, I like Africa and South America a lot. I mean, I don't like Europe, or sorry to say America. It seems too familiar, and I want the. I mean, when you go, Italy is of course a beautiful country as well, but everywhere you go, it's more or less the same type of buildings. But Egypt, you don't get to see the pyramids or the Nile trip. I mean, it's somewhere in some place special. It's different, as I said, and it's where civilization started as well, with the pharaohs.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, Egypt is one of those countries that you learn about at a very young age. You know the pyramids, you know the Nile, you know the pharaohs and King Tut. So that's something I think a lot of people grow up with at a young age. Yeah. So I want to know, so you get to spread your wings, you get to go on your first trip, you're not with your family. What was your family thinking when you left Turkey for your first time as a single young woman on this trip? Were they supportive and excited?
Oh, I mean, they weren't especially supportive, but they weren't so against it. My mother, because I was going with a tour group, it was sort of a consolation for my mother, or she was fine with me going with a tour. But my problems with my mother especially started when I first wanted to go on this first round the world tour. And after I quit university, I said, I'm fine. I'm done with the things that I have to do for you and for society. And that's where all our complications with my mother, as I said, started then.
Okay. So, Gulen, this sounds like a very pivotal moment in your life. It sounds like you're going down a traditional track that many of us go down, graduate from university, get a good job, stay close to the family. But it sounds like you made a right turn somewhere. You said you quit university or you quit work, and then you planned a round the world trip. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Actually, I mean, I was a teaching assistant at the university, as I said, and I was doing my I was doing my PhD, and I passed my courses and I passed my proficiency exam, and I wrote the proposal for my thesis. And then I said, but I was in mechanical engineering. And okay, because why did I go there? Because I understood maths and sciences. And, you know, it requires the top grades to get to the university. And everybody wants to go to an engineering school. And Boğaziçi is the best school, best university in Turkey. So I had an enviable place and life. And prestigious position. But then I said, this is not for me. I mean, even though I loved meeting 50, 60 young people every day, every year, and they have become my friends as well, but that's not enough. And I was just thinking, life shouldn't be lived within 15 square kilometers. I was going up and down the Bosphorus, for example, and it's a very special part of the world. You are, as I said, between the two continents connecting Asia and Europe. So I had a very good life, but it didn't satisfy me. And I was married because that's what society expected of me. But I said, I am not content. There must be more to life. So.
Okay. So, Gulen, from what you're describing to me, it does sound like a really good and promising life. You're obviously a very intelligent person getting a very difficult degree, which I assume would, lead to a good career. You said you're married.
Yes.
You're living in a great place of Turkey. What do you think? Why wasn't it good enough? Why weren't you? What do you think is going on in your mind that you're not satisfied with what sounds like a really good and promising life?
Because, as I said, there is a world out there. Even though I may have lived a privileged life, you cannot just live that life all your life. I mean, I wanted to experience what's out there, to see the world for myself. And I think I have done a good job, and I've done it. I'm very happy that I did it, because I have my friends, and I could have had a very nice career, as you said, making the big bucks, going to an office, but that wouldn't. I mean, I see my friends are not so happy with their lives. I mean, okay, but what you
Okay,
want.
so Gulen, yeah. Okay, so this is, I mean, at some level, this is a traumatic change in your life. So it sounds like you're about to take off around the world and you're leaving your friends, your career, your university, your family, but you're also, it sounds like you're leaving your husband.
Yes, exactly.
How do you make a transition like this, and how difficult is it?
It was actually very difficult. It was very, very difficult for my husband as well. But we've grown up in a very conservative society, and I told this about in the group as well with the Türkan Şoray laws. Türkan Şoray is the most famous artist in Turkey, and she had this no kissing rules at the for the cinemas. And I mean, to me, I didn't have any idea what marriage was, what life was about, because as I told you, I mean, I grew up with family problems, and I also had some health problems. I mean, I had trouble with walking and climbing steps. So I mean, I lived a very secluded life and protected life, but I wanted more. And my mother, of course, being divorced herself, she wanted me to be married and have a good life. And my husband was a very good man, but it's not enough to be a good man for a marriage. And my mother couldn't really understand it. And she said, let me take you to a psychologist if you want to divorce. And she even said she was going to commit suicide. I said, Mother, I mean, I know it's not nice, but it's not the end of the world. And I'm not the first person who's going to be getting a divorce, and I won't be the last person. And it's not that we didn't have a child or anything. So it's not nice, but now I mean, I see I would have divorced any guy I had met at that time because I wasn't satisfied. I had not found myself, and there were many things that I wanted to do.
Okay. Well, at some level, it sounds like from the perspective of your mother or family, they must have thought you had gone crazy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. So what age are you when you embark on this around the world trip?
I was actually 31, 32 when I did this. So I wasn't even young. I mean, I wasn't a young person, so I was independent. I was making my own money and everything. So, but still, they want to interfere with your life, and it's the family ruling.
Of course. Okay, so 31 or so, making a major transformation in your life, and you head out around the world. So are you by yourself, with a friend? Where did you go? Give me a real quick high-level overview of this trip.
Actually, I mean, I decided to embark on this trip, but I didn't know what to do. I told you before that the only place I had been to on my own was South Africa, and I had been to Cape Town. And in that trip, I wasn't even sure how I could travel. But this was the first time, so I was looking for somebody to travel with, and I asked around, and everybody wants to travel the world. They say, "Oh yeah, we would love that," but they don't even have the money, or they don't have the time. So it's not possible to find somebody to travel the world with. But a friend connected me to a friend, and that friend suggested Thorntree, the Lonely Planet Thorntree. And I said, okay.
Yep. So that's the Lonely Planet Thorntree forum where travelers can post questions.
Exactly, or find travel companions. So I at that point, I wasn't really into internet either. I mean, not like these days. I just said, okay, let me go through a couple of pages. And I went, and then I saw this jungle runner. They were searching for a fourth person. They had this truck and all the trip planned. And I said, okay, let me write to them. If they accept me, I'll be going on the trip. And if not, I'll be finding something else. And in the end, they accepted me. So we started this round the world tour together with three more foreigners.
Okay, so this is, I mean, at some level, from my perspective, pretty brave. You had barely left Turkey. Mm-hmm. It sounds like only a couple trips overseas. Exactly. And here you're throwing yourself over the cliff. So what's it like joining a group of strangers from different cultures and then embarking on a multi-month road trip around the world in a truck with some strangers? You know what?
I was just so excited with the idea. I didn't give a thought to, I mean, you know, when I'm doing something, I just do not think. And I realized, for example, that trip I told you about, going to South Africa, it was just on an impulse. And I just jumped on a taxi in a rainy day and went and bought a ticket and went. And you know what? I was just on the plane going there doing this, and I had not got myself mentally ready for this trip. I was thinking, okay, my mind is back there. Am I really going to South Africa on my own? Am I really doing this? So it was the same with this round the world trip as well. I mean, I was just so excited and I was going with the flow. And I mean, there have been many things in my life. I noticed if I had thought of it beforehand, I would never be able to do those things. I mean, for example, I found myself in Cuba walking out at night. And I said to myself, would you do that, Gülin, if you were in your hometown? No, I wouldn't. But so it's just the flow. The flow just carried me. And I was out there, as you said, with these strangers. And some people warned me. I mean, I found these people online. Did I check who he was or whatever? And I had paid in money because they wanted a deposit for me to join with the tour group. Because, as I said, we were going to be traveling with a truck. And I said, no, I didn't. But I mean, he had this website written all about his previous trips, and he was the son of a missionaries, and he grew up in Kenya and spoke Swahili. And I was just fine. I trust people, and luckily I wasn't fooled, so it was fine.
Okay, so give me a high-level overview of the trip. How many months was it, give or take, and a broad overline of where you went to visit?
It was 15 months. It ended up to be 15 months in the end, but it's, of course, involved a lot of things, because at the start of the trip, because I had quit university, it was just such a big disappointment for my mother, and I wanted to write, and I said, I'm doing this, and I realize now that I am the first Turkish person to go backpacking in Turkey. And I applied to some newspapers, and I actually got to be in the front cover of one of the three most read national newspapers. So they introduced me to this war journalist. They had my big headlines with me. Gülin is going to be traveling with these people. So I didn't really know what was going on with all these advertisements and things. And anyway, but I joined and I wrote some articles. And we are traveling in Africa. In Africa, I was just sort of, we got this insurance as well. What if you are kidnapped? I was thinking, if you are kidnapped, they pay the money to the kidnappers and they save us. And my brother laughed. What do you think that money is for? If things worked out that way, that would be supporting these people. So the insurance is for the people who are left behind you to be paid. So I was thinking, okay, Africa is such a dangerous place, and we are traveling with a truck. And at one point in Kenya, a soldier stopped us. And there are so many roadblocks there. And he asked for $50. And Jeff, who was our tour guide in a way, who had arranged this trip, offered, what about 3 pence? And I was just thinking to myself, are you out of your mind? I mean, he has a gun and he's asking for $50. What is 3 pence? Ordinary pence. These are not luxurious crossbars. And to my amazement, the soldier said, okay. And as he was walking out, he just turned to me and he said, she looks so young, whatever that meant. Anyway, and I wrote this story to the newspaper, and the newspapers published it with a headline, the Kenyan soldier set eyes on Gülin. It set eyes on me. So as if I had said this. And I was just so taken aback because that's something that would never come out of my mouth. And I would have been fine if they said Ayzan Gül'in, as if it was them saying it. But of course, I understand they want sensational stuff. And I had a bad feedback from someone. And this is just next to people lying on the beach naked and whatever. And I wrote a very bad email to the company. Look, I'm coming from a prestigious university. I have a name. I'm not going to be after this sensational stuff. So that was the end of my journalism.
That sounds like a pretty eventful trip.
Yes, it was.
To say the least. So what was the takeaway from the trip? You made this big transition from a traditional conservative life, being married, working with your family, and then you made a complete 180.
Yes, actually.
Go on this adventure with a group of strangers, 15 months, having amazing experiences, and then eventually you end up going back home. So are you a different person? What did this trip mean to you?
Yes, actually, it of course changed me. I had confidence in myself right now, and I realized that, okay, I could survive anywhere in the world. And I realized that we don't really need all this stuff that we have in our lives. And I could just, what can I eat? Just very little. And all we need is a roof over our heads and something to cover ourselves and just some food in our stomach. So that was a test of my limits. And I found out my limits and I realized that I could survive. And I was fine with living in those conditions as well. So it also opened up the way for me to appreciate what I had when I turned back. But you know what I said when I came back? This is like returning to an aquarium after being in the ocean. So it's a safe place. It's more protected, of course, the aquarium, but it's also more polluted. And I realized that I feel much better and much lighter when I'm traveling. Because things are transitory, and people, when you are especially settled in one place, it feels like, okay, you have control over your life and everything, and as if you live as if you are here forever without realizing that, we are all passers-by in this world and in this life. And when you are traveling, it just gives you that sense of, it's the lightness of being, I say, for me.
So this new chapter starts. What happens next? Are you going to get a job back in Turkey and get back into traditional life? Or does this mean it's a new world and it's only going to be travel coming, going into the future?
It has changed my life. And I realized that there was no going back. When starting this first round the world tour, people, my uncle also warned me, look, you won't be able to come back to the same conditions. I said, I will be going back to the university, whatever it is. What is it, 15 months away? Or I can just get my job back. But I didn't want to I wanted to write and lead a different kind of life. But of course, I had to make a living. So I wrote a book, and it was published by one of the main publishers in Turkey. But of course, it was not easy to go through all this process, and especially given that how safe and secure the university environment is, you would know what you would be doing. And in this life, I started a freelancing career. I worked as a tour guide or tour leader, let me say, because I didn't work in Turkey. I took Turkish people traveling abroad, and but it was a difficult position for me. And of course, there was always the pressure from my family, because what you gave up, I felt that I had to be at least at a sort of get to the same level of achievement, or I don't know how you want to call it, or the financial means. And I never got back to that, basically.
Okay, so you get back from the 15-month trip, you're a different person, you're not going to go back to a traditional life. You take on sort of a contractor, freelancer type job career, And are you planning the second trip?
Actually, that came out when I was writing. When you write, things come out, and that the things that you haven't thought of come out of your pen or your hand. And I said, okay, when I was writing, as a friend of mine said, okay, she had this group and they were going to get a sailing license. She said, why don't you come along? Because Turkey is joining the EU and there had to be a certain number of people who had sailing licenses. So it was easy to get the license and 20 multiple questions. And I got that sailing license. And since I was writing the book when I did this, I said, okay, now I got this license. I'll be traveling around the world sailing. And then I said, I was into flying as well. I said, okay. And then after that trip, I learned how to fly and I traveled the world flying as well. It would be nice ideas. I mean, these are fun, nice ideas for me. But then I said, why not turn this into reality? I like the idea. So.
Okay. So you embark on a sailing trip with some friends. Is that multiple months? What continents? What countries? What's this trip entail?
No, actually, I didn't embark on this trip. I mean, the idea just formed in. So I wanted to go around sailing. But of course, a sailing license is not enough to just go around sailing. First, you need the money to buy a boat. And of course, you need the experience. I mean, traveling the seas is not the same as traveling over land and taking trains or buses. You need experience. You just cannot go out. And I didn't have neither experience and I didn't have the money to buy a boat. But my mind was set on this goal and I started searching for, looking for work for traveling as a crew on a sailing boat. So that's how it started.
Okay, so you attempted to do a sailing trip. You didn't have enough money for a boat. And then you transitioned to becoming part of a crew on a boat, and then you ended up doing the trip?
Exactly, that's what happened.
Okay, Gulin. So it sounds like you're a different person. You come back from the first round-the-world trip. You know you can't get back into traditional life. You take on a series of freelancing and contractor jobs and writing. Was there a second trip in the offering coming? You mentioned that you did 3 round-the-world trips. So when did this second trip start and how did it come to fruition?
Actually, I got back into a routine life, this time just taking on a freelance career. And I actually got married a second time, but I again was not satisfied with this life. And I realized I couldn't keep up with what the society expected of me. I found myself as a job as a crew on a boat which was going from Marmaris to Phuket. And then, after 3 days of sailing to Egypt, I got kicked out of the boat. So that was again the end of my dreams, may I say.
Okay, so this was a short-lived round-the-world sailing trip. But before we talk about that, you kind of grabbed my attention again. So you got pulled back in, so to speak. So you got married a second time after going around this round the world 15-month truck trip.
I mean, after 6 years.
How did that happen? Because from what I just heard, your eyes had completely opened up after this 15-month trip of, I can be completely free, de minimis lifestyle, travel's my new life. How did you get married a second time?
But you see, I mean, it's fine. That's why I say I like traveling, because the longer you stay, you feel the pressure, the social pressure on you. So I stayed for 6 years living in the same place. I mean, traveling occasionally, but returning back. So and the social mechanisms work. So there is still the pressure. So I am getting older now. And what about a child? Or the society expects, especially as a woman, for you to be married and having a proper life. And especially my mother, who is just a fearful person. And she wanted me to have a settled life. And I sort of gave in. I said, okay, let me try it again this time. Maybe it will work. And my best friend at the time suggested, this man was, he was a free man. She said he would let you go and do whatever you want. So he won't interfere. You just get married. So you pretend to have a family life and so that you are respected in society, but you do whatever you like. I said, okay, let me pretend and do what the society expects of me. But in the end, of course, I came back to my senses again and I realized that I couldn't really do it.
Okay, so was this transition easier or harder than the first one? Again, you divorced your first husband to go on the round the world trip, and now it happens again. Was this harder for you and your family and the husband?
It was harder in some ways for me because now I had I had my own life and I had my own place that I was renting. But this place was just so nice. It was overlooking the Bosphorus again with a view, and it was tiny. But my husband wouldn't leave the house, and then of course, if he doesn't leave, I couldn't go back to my mother, and I couldn't find a place like that again in Istanbul. It's not easy. But on one hand, and with my mother, I said, Mother, look, I'm divorced. I'm almost 40 years old. And if you start the same things again, and this man, the first one wasn't like that. He was a good man. But this man is not good, and I shouldn't have married him in the first place. But if you start doing that again, I will be just going away and you will not be seeing me. So she sort of relaxed the pressure on me. And when I said, okay, I am leaving on this world trip, I was still married by the time. By the way, I didn't divorce, but I had to get away. And my mother was saying, okay, how is this going on? Because now I belong to my husband, I'm married. My mother cannot interfere with me so much as before. So it was like that.
Okay. Some controversy there. So now you're getting ready for your second around the world trip. Excitement, pretty cool. You're on a sailboat. I think you said Egypt, Turkey to Phuket. But it sounds like it ended very quickly. You mentioned getting kicked off in Egypt. How many days into the trip was that?
It was 3 days into the trip.
Okay, so what happened after 3 days where you got kicked off?
Actually, I should be thanking that captain who kicked me out, and he was a bad captain. And I realized that there were many things that were wrong with the boat. And I was just, as I told you, sailing is just something else. It's not as safe as land where you can just fly off, leave people and go on your own. You are out at sea or in the ocean. What do? I have no idea about sailing. But I was lucky because I got kicked out, but I wasn't ready to give up on my dream. I started this trip and I again was on the newspapers. And my mother started pressuring me, come back, see, there is trouble. And I said, I want to go on with this trip. I want to do this. I have to try. I have to find a cargo ship or another boat, another sailing boat. But I have to do this trip. I have to give my best to see if I can do it. And then by chance, I found exactly the same type of boat, Lagoon 440, going to Phuket. But then there was a catch. There were 4 men on it. And then there were 4 cabins. I said, okay, now if they get me, that's sort of, as one woman with 4 men, it's sort of, and it's going to be difficult. But it turned out one of the men had missed his wife and he was leaving. So I got on board and it was fine at the beginning. I was thinking, okay, these people are light, relaxed. The captain knows what he is doing. So we got on the road. Sailing at Red Sea. We were crossing it and then they had a fight. One of the men had a fight with the captain and he said he was getting off in Aden. Okay, now we were left 3 people to cross the Indian Ocean to go to Phuket. And then the third person started acting strangely. It turned out, he was messing around with the sails at night and we got into very dangerous situations. And I said, what is going on? And he entered into my room, caressing my legs and whatever. They were fighting in the middle of the night with the captain. I was just, of course, as I said, very stressed. What's going to be happening to me? And they are fighting in French, and I don't understand a word of it. And I felt like I was a child with my parents fighting and not knowing. You are you are helpless there. And then in the end, the captain kicked out the person, and it turned out that that person had been into a mental asylum beforehand, before the start of the trip, and he was taken back to a mental asylum. And he was taken at Egypt airport in handcuffs and put on the plane like that. So we were lucky that we discovered that before we set out on the Indian Ocean ourselves.
That's much better timing. So I'm glad to hear he was safely escorted off the boat.
Yeah.
What was the positive highlight of that trip?
Well, actually now we are left to how do we do it? But we did it, and we had some storms in the Bengal Sea and whatever. But again, that being in the ocean taught me how small we are again, because you realize, as I said, when actually it got dark and the lights turned out on the boat, you realize, okay, you sort of have some power, but when you are out at sea, you are so tiny and you don't see anybody around for a week. No, not even a cargo ship. When we call the cargo ships our big brothers, so sort of protecting us in a way when we saw a cargo ship from a distance. But you realized, I mean, nature is so much greater than you, and there were nights all covered black and dolphins jumping in the sea. I mean, there were wonderful moments as well, and very scary moments during that storm.
Cool. And I also understand that this sailing trip was also a really important, critical part of your life, because in the beginning, right after you got kicked off the boat in Egypt, you had a very fortuitous meeting with a gentleman.
Exactly. We had these 5 handsome Italians who had a boat going to Hurghada, and one of them suggested to help me when going on the boat. The captain and the other crew had left to go to Cairo for a trip, and I stayed back to find out what I would do with how I would be continuing this trip. And when he offered this help with the boat, I said, okay, probably you are an experienced sailor. You might help me how I can find another sailing boat. And he said this was actually his first long trip. And at that moment, I lost total interest in him. So because I'm so concentrated how to continue this trip. But then it wouldn't be good manners to say, okay, ciao, at that point. And I invited him over. Would you come for tea? And we just had a 10-minute chat, and we exchanged business cards after that chat. And he gave me a dolphin necklace tail to help me with this trip of mine. But, I mean, you encounter people on your travels, and then they just disappear if by chance you meet them in a couple of years later. But at that time, I had only 2 songs in my laptop. And I only listen to songs when I'm depressed or feeling bad. And I turned it on to listen. And then there were 2 Italian songs that I found out from a Ferzan Özpetek movie, who is a Turkish living in Italy. And I said, okay, let me write to this, to Carlo, who just gave me this dolphin tail necklace, and I thank him. And we started exchanging messages. And in the end, that turned out to be, yes, a total change of my life. He came to visit me in Thailand.
So this was at the end of your sailing trip when the boat finally got to Phuket, I believe. Then you're saying exactly. Carlo, your future husband, ended up flying over and meeting you?
Exactly.
And again, I'm thinking of your life, growing up in Turkey, more of a conservative society, a Muslim society, and now you have a Western European guy flying halfway around the world to meet you after, I think, only a give or take 10-minute conversation.
Exactly.
So you made a tremendous change in your life. What are you thinking when the gentleman you've been corresponding with for a long time is like, okay, Gulin, I'm getting on the plane. I'm going to see you in 22 hours. What's going on in the back of your mind in context of who you were before, or comparison to who you were before?
Well, actually, at that point, as I said, that was me of wanting to get away from my husband, and I had not said that I wanted to divorce, but I was just thinking, okay, I want to divorce, and he has to understand this, that I'm not going back to him at the end of this around the world tour. And we talked this with the captain when we were sailing in the oceans, and he said, why don't you keep him at bay? He's waiting for me. I said, no, it's finished for me. And of course, there was nothing going on with this Carlo, but he had said when giving that necklace to me, you keep it until we meet again. And these are just big words, but I was thinking of writing a book again, and I thought, okay, putting in a handsome Italian man would not hurt the story. It sells. It's a good story. And okay, now I found somebody who would write that part for me, because I write fiction is something else, and I'm not so good with that. So I said, okay, he's writing that. Well, let's go around I'm playing around with it, and I'm now 39. I'm married twice, and I'm now the carefree person. I can do whatever I want. But of course, then I realized, what is this man? As you said, he's coming halfway across. What kind of a man should he be to come across, to meet a girl that he met after 10 minutes? And I just said, okay, when he came, okay, I said, okay, this is not going to be working out. But then I said, okay, let's go ahead. I'm now a free woman, and I do whatever. And in the end, it turned out he wasn't such a person. He said that was just something. He's a very shy person, and he has never done such a thing. It's classical, but that is true. And he was 47 and not married beforehand. And he said, he was there sitting and just thinking to himself, if she goes now, we are leaving, and then I won't be seeing her again. And then he said that something made him get out of boat and give that necklace to me. So now I believe that, as I said, I believe in destiny or kismet.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. That sounds like fate or kismet. So
yeah.
And how long did you guys spend in Phuket, or what was the next step? Did you travel somewhere else? Did you move somewhere?
Actually, we didn't go in Phuket. We went to Komak. He found another island, and that was just 5 days over Christmas, and he was sick. But it was the best days of my life, and I was just thinking, okay, if it doesn't work out, this is Thailand. He travels on his own, and I go on my way. But as I said, we were just so good together, and then I crossed the Pacific Ocean on a cargo ship, and that was very difficult as well, because people think it's so a cargo ships, it's free, you can get on it. It's not that easy. You have to give so many papers, and I signed a paper saying I allow people to search my bodily cavities, etc. Anyway, when I crossed Central America, he came to Mexico to visit me. And then I crossed the Atlantic Ocean with a cruise ship, and then he came to Barcelona and picked me up. And from Barcelona, he took me to Italy. The next day, he introduced me to his mother. So it was just all so fast. And then in the end, he said he had never been to Turkey. Why don't I come with you to Turkey sailing? And we had a friend of his who was going to Turkey. So we went back to Turkey together as well.
Okay. So I'm hearing you really found romance and love on this second trip, and a pretty amazing story. Gulin, so you and Carlo made it to Turkey. He got to go there for his first time, and I know there's some major transitions after that. So give a brief overview of how you ended up in Italy.
Brief overview. Actually, found out that we were pregnant when we were in Delphi. And then, of course, it's difficult to get to Italy. So we ended up in Las Vegas getting married, and then I settled in Turkey.
And settled into Italy.
Sorry, I said to Italy.
Okay. So, in short, it sounds like that's another book in the waiting,
Exactly.
To say the least. So now in Italy with the family, congratulations. That's great.
Thank you.
Give me a quick rundown. Let's talk about countries, and let's talk about your country count. On the 193 UN countries, where are you?
I'm at 145, but I'm counting 195.
Okay. And we know you took 3 great momentous trips around the world. Was there ever a light bulb moment when you said to yourself, oh my God, I've done a lot of traveling. I've been to a bunch of countries. Wait a minute, I can go to all 193, 195. Was there a light bulb moment, or how did you make the transition to being an avid traveler to being stating that you're going to be one of the few to travel to every country in the world?
Actually, that was before I started the third round the world tour. I was thinking, okay, I had this baby, but I said, okay, I'll be traveling once she grows up a bit more. And I always wanted to do the Trans-Siberian trip, which is the special thing for travelers. But they said, okay, with a baby, it's hard. Anyway, I did this, but then once you go, you don't turn back. But I was on the news talking to some newspapers, travel magazines. They said, okay, we would like to publish you, but about your trips. And I said, at that point, because in the second round of the world tour, I came across so many imaginary lines and I bumped into them. They said, okay, go back to your country, get a visa for places that I actually didn't need a visa for. And I was just so upset about traveling. And then traveling is not actually just traveling, and it's just all these visa things and the bureaucracy that you have to deal with. So I said, okay, but I won't be giving you only travel interviews. I want to talk about the freedom of movement. I came up with this thing that anybody who doesn't question borders shouldn't call himself or herself a traveler. And at that point, I said, I'm going to be going to every country and I'll be burning my passports.
Okay. So that seems a bit extreme. You don't believe in borders, it sounds like.
No,
and out of it sounds like in essence a protest. When you complete the goal, you're going to burn your passport.
Exactly. I mean, I don't know.
Does that mean you're literally not going to leave Italy after you do that?
Well, that's on discussion with my husband now, because now I'm not alone and I have a child that I am responsible for and a family. So I was thinking, I actually want to be stateless. I tried that, but I couldn't. I searched it and I couldn't really get out of citizenship, leave Turkey, because they don't let you out, because then you'll be a stateless person unless you get another citizenship. But now I have an Italian citizenship. And I don't really know. It's a work in progress. And there is still time that I complete this mission to every country. I hope to complete it in 2 years, but who knows what's going to be happening. And burning my passport, I should be having some people behind my back to make this worth something. So it's not that I burn my passport in our fireplace with Carlo over a bottle of wine. It just doesn't work that way. It's not going to help anybody. And I don't want to just punish myself for nothing. I want this to be sort of meaningful. I mean, I know it's not going to be changing the world, but at least it should have an impact or put a question mark in some people's minds.
Okay. And to be devil's advocate, how can it be anything but? So in other words, we have 7 billion people in the world, 193 sovereign countries, according to the UN. How can it be anything but you burning your passport in the fireplace over a nice bottle of red?
What do you mean? How can it be?
Oh, well, you're saying. But I mean, one person burning one passport. I don't see how that's going to have any cause and effect in changing the way the world is ordered in terms of borders, passports, visas. So, in other words, walk me through how it can be anything but you making a symbolic burning in the fireplace.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. No, that's not what I was going to do. I want some people behind my back who would burn their passports with me.
So my point is, where are these people going to come from that are going to get back behind you and support you? What is your plan to make it anything but the fireplace burning?
Well, I am trying to publish and promote my website and my articles or get on the media somehow, but until now, hasn't been my success. But in the end, I mean, this is for me. I don't want to be a part of this madness. That's the way I see it. It's the same. It goes with the security checks at airports. I don't believe in these. I don't believe in borders. I don't believe in these security checks. That's not how you establish a better world. I believe that money should be put in making people, giving a better life to people. Put the money on people and infrastructure instead of these security and protecting yourself, because it doesn't work. It's just ruining the world, I believe.
Okay, so back to the burning of the passport. The goal or hope is through your writings, through media, there'll be some sort of grassroots movement around the world of people joining you and burning their passports in kind.
Exactly. I mean, I think at least even if 500 people or 1,000 people gathered in a square, and I believe there are people out there who believe in a borderless world. There are. I mean, we might be a small number, but there are people, and they don't even have to burn their real passports. To me, it's just a symbolic gesture. It's not going to change the world. But I realized I was just so upset, and then people were just coming at me. It's not possible that a borderless world is going to be. And then I realized I am not they call me utopian. I am not the dreamer. The real dreamers are the ones who believe that the world is just going to be staying like this, because I believe it's not going to be staying like this. I mean, like slavery, nobody could imagine a world without slaves, and now we don't have it anymore. Or global the apartheid in South Africa. This is apartheid as well. You cannot move from one place to another. Why? Because you were born within some imaginary line that was drawn by bloody war or bloody politics. And I don't know, to me it's madness.
Okay, and touch upon what do you mean by you don't believe in security at airports?
For example, I just had an issue coming back from Stansted in London. They wanted to get me through the body scanner, and I said I didn't want to do it. You know, in America, it's easy. If you want to opt up hand search, they just do it automatically. They said, "Oh, why don't you do it?" I don't want to go through that scanner. I don't know. Okay, there is technology. It doesn't serve all these security checks. I don't want to give anybody any ideas, but they sell glass bottles at the airport. So anybody can go into the bathroom, break that bottle, and here you have a knife. You have a weapon that is worse than a knife. So if more bombs or things do not go bad, it's not because of the security checks. It's just because there aren't so many bad people out there. So anything can happen on the metros. Why aren't there bombs in metros? There have been, of course, but why aren't there bombs every day exploding? It's just that, some people did something wrong. Okay, September 11th happened, and we have all become suspects. What's worse, even now, 17 years on, we are all suspects. Anybody who dares walk into the sacred grounds of an airport is a suspect. I mean, tell me, what part of
okay. So if I understand you, so go on. So let's specifically look at the airport, whether it's the body scanners, the x-ray machines. Are you saying get rid of all those?
Yes, I am exactly saying that. And yesterday we were talking with my husband. If they said that they are just abolishing security checks at airports tomorrow, I would feel naked going on an airplane myself. Even though I do not believe in them, I don't believe that they are protecting us with bus. It's just costing us and hassling us with 100 milliliter. I've had millions of stories on that, and I have written about them. I have written a book about it as well.
Okay,
The
so
thing is,
my question is, obviously the security system is not flawless or perfect, and sometimes it's inane, but it works on many other levels. So you're saying you have no issue with people bringing firearms onto planes, which are somewhat readily detectable using the security that we have placed in airports today.
not firearms, of course. I'm not. I don't support any firearms. Basically, in America, I want all firearms to be abolished as well. I don't want them.
Okay, so well, we're talking reality versus another world that doesn't currently exist. So back to kind of my question, you're saying you don't want security in the airport.
No, I don't.
People do have guns. And in general, a gun is detected during a X-ray, body scan, et cetera, et cetera. So walk me through your world where there's no security at the airport and people are free to bring firearms into airports and airplanes.
Well, I can walk you through the metros or subways, which there aren't any security checks, and it's the same thing. And one more point that I'd like to make, for example, in Turkey, in Istanbul, when you walk into, before the check-in line, there is a control, there is a security check, and there is a second security check. So if it's the amount of numbers, people tell me it's the amount of people going, and this counts for the metro as well. There are crowded metro stations, and anybody can go into the check-in line and use a gun, right? Machine gun. Correct. Or whatever. So what's that line? Where is the security check line? What is special about it? Why is it just we don't want to be killed when we cross that line? What about being killed before that line? It doesn't make sense to me. I cannot understand it. Sorry. And I cannot understand how big people put in money, because we are paying the price of the security searches. It's not the governments. The governments do not have money. They tax us. We pay it with our tickets. I mean, and if there was an airport without the security checks and the flight, I would go through that. And my argument is that, as I said, you put the money on people, on infrastructure, and then you won't be getting these things. And then, plus there's the intelligence, of course. I mean, I don't know how they do it, but intelligence stops any attacks. That's what I believe in. Not all these security searches. It's a security theater, as Bush Schneier says it.
Okay, so back to counting countries. You're at 147. You got around 45 or so. Mm-hmm. Your goal is to do it within the next 2 years. What's the challenges? You have a child. How do you pull that? How old's your child, and how do you pull visiting 45 countries, give or take, being a mother of a child?
Well, she's 6.5 years old, so now and she started school, so it's a bit easier for me now. Of course, it puts a strain on my husband because he has to take time off work and look after her. But now, of course, it's not like my previous travels. I cannot take off for 15 months or a year long. I take short jumps, and or 2 weeks off or something like that to visit 5 or 6 countries. And then, so that's how I do it, basically. Okay. With the help of my husband.
Okay. He's a very supportive guy, to say the least. And yes. I want to know a little bit about your style. So we know that in terms of transportation, you're very diverse. So whether it's truck or plane or boat, but what inspires you? So in other words, you touch down in a new country. Is it checking out the newest restaurant, the beach, the museum, the national parks, UNESCO? What moves you?
Well, actually, it depends on the country that I am going. In some places, for example, we've been to London, we visited all the museums. But when you go somewhere in Africa, you don't get all those museums. And to me, right now, after seeing so many, I believe everybody is sort of like that. Because you feel like, okay, you have seen this before. You have lived that before. They are sort of more or less similar. So things that surprise you is not as many as before. And to me, I walk the earth, leave my footsteps in the world. I breathe the air of a place and walk through thousands of people. people who lead very different lives than me, and people who all have stories to tell. And sometimes you just bump into, so people interest me basically, and their stories. And to me, as I said, traveling is about learning about your limits and stretching your limits.
Do you have an anecdote? Obviously, meeting people on the road, as you said, can be a great experience, a great memory. Who's a person you've met on the road that you think serves kind of as an anecdote of the beauty or magic of travel?
Well, I have so many actually, but it's the little connections. For example, I can give one off the top of my mind. It comes. I was in Uruguay, and I took a photo of a child. I was taking photos of children around the world, and the woman asked if I could print it out, because at that point they didn't have for places to print photos, I suppose. And I said I would be doing that. I got her address, but I couldn't take it because we had this accident. And then afterwards, I lived in Buenos Aires for some time, and I went to Uruguay and found this woman and gave it to her, and she was so happy. Or, for example, I was returned from the border at Panama when I was traveling in Central America. We didn't need visas in any of those places. And I was bitten by a dog, and I couldn't get a shot. And then, you die if you get rabies. It's not like any other sickness. You cannot get sick. And then I was just so upset. I was so down, and I was crying. And this huge lady, she just said, are you traveling alone? And I said, yes, I'm traveling alone, and I feel lonely. And I just broke down, and she just hugged me. And it was just so special, and then some other small child gave me a bottle of water. I suppose it's the parents who saw me so helplessly crying and at the border. It's these little things, and I have so many, of course, of these stories.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can imagine. Must have been a great feeling when she came over and embraced you.
Exactly.
But and curious, how did that turn out then? So you're by yourself, not allowed to enter Panama, and you're dealing with a dog bite. So what did you do at that point?
Well, I wasn't suicidal, but, I was just at that point, I didn't care if I lived or died. And I said, okay, let me leave it to God or to fate or whatever it is. And as I said, there was the pressure from my mother. At that point, she was just pressuring me because of the troubles that I faced during my travels. Come back. I give you money. You go on a tour. You still travel, but travel safely. And I had told my mother, you gave me life, but if you are not going to let me live the life I want, I can just take it without a blink. And so, as I said, I just didn't care about the world or anything. But in the end, I went back to Costa Rica. I flew, and I was just fed up with Costa Rica. I didn't want to. And then I realized, and there was a reason that for my going back, because Costa Rica is a beautiful country. I said, okay, it wanted me to see its beauties as well, apart from all the troubles with people that I had encountered beforehand.
Okay, and back to the dog bite. So did you stay in Costa Rica for medical care? Did you have to go through the rabies shots? What was the end? What happened there?
Yeah, in Costa Rica, I got a shot, but it was, of course, after a couple of days. And actually, I went through Nicaragua, and they didn't have the rabies shot. So it as I said, it took longer for me to have the shot, and it's important that you get it within a short period. And then I had another one when I got back to Barcelona, but I still feared because I read online that you could get rabies even after 8 years. But now 8 years have passed, so I think I'm good.
So, you were feeling alone, a lot of frustration.
Yes.
Do you revisit your travel life? So are you saying to yourself, you know what, maybe this is too much. I'm putting myself at risk. I'm all alone. I need help. or are you, after a couple of days, you're like, screw that, the road is my life, and dog bite be damned, I'm carrying on?
I think every traveler, I don't know, but every traveler feels that. I mean, you think, what am I doing here, out in the somewhere, out, just why am I not home with the people I love or whatever? But right now, it's a different story. Now I have a family that I love, and now I have to be more careful about myself as well, because as I said, I'm responsible for other people. Beforehand, I just didn't care what happened to me because I'm alone on my own and I do whatever I want. So now it's not so easy. So I lost a bit of my freedom, but it is worth it for what I am getting in return with this settled life and the affection and the family life.
Semi-settled life.
Yes.
Okay. So, Gulen, 147 countries, a lot of travel, a lot of time on the road. Share with me one of your favorite places in the world: a beach, a mountain, a museum, a city, a country.
If it's to be a city, I would say Buenos Aires. I wouldn't say, a beach or any place. There are wonderful beaches in the Pacific. In Rarotonga, for example, I like the Cook Islands a lot. More than Bora Bora or the other famous places. But Buenos Aires has a special place in my heart because I live there and I love the atmosphere of Latin America. I love all Latin America, basically. But Buenos Aires is mine.
So yeah, I think you mentioned you lived there for several months in BA. Why is that city call to you?
Because it's alive. Everywhere you go out, there is tango, people dancing. It's children out there in the parks playing, and there is always some sort of artistic entertainment going out on the street. There is life outside. And I was there actually when the peso broke down and there were all these riots. So I lived through that as well. But they have this spirit and the liveliness that you do not get in European or American countries. That's how I feel, at least. And unfortunately for me, I know you live in Bangkok as well, but that doesn't speak to me, or I don't really like India. Okay, it's colorful. Of course, it's a continent. And so, of course, there's much to see. For example, I like Myanmar and Laos a lot too. But Latin America, and I like the language as well. I don't know. And for example, you go to a tango show and you see I would have loved to be able to dance like them, to devote my life, live for that. I don't know. It just
did you take any tango lessons?
Yeah, I did, but for a short time. Hopefully when my husband retires, we will have time for that.
And why are the beaches on Cook Island special?
I don't know. I just love the sea and the beach there, the place that we went. That seemed very special to me. But of course, there are many special places in Phuket as well. It's a lovely place. But the thing is about Phuket, there are many nice places and beaches, but it's a bit crowded. The same goes for Angkor Wat as well and other big places. I love those places, but I understand, of course, they are touristic, but I would love to be able to be in those places when there are very few people and you can just stay at night. I actually considered staying in one of the pyramids in South America as well, in Central America. That would be nice to sneak in and just see the stars and all to yourself, all that place when it was like before, about 500 years ago at least.
Okay, so Gulen, how about least favorite place? Bad memories, bad experience, don't want to go back.
Well, may I say I don't have that. I mean, I was thinking, for example, when I went to Erbil in Iraq, I was thinking, I mean, who would go there? And also in Malawi, I was thinking, I didn't even know that a country named Malawi existed. I mean, sorry to say about my ignorance, but it was like that back in 2001. And you visit these least visited places or people who do not have an interest in going to. But then you realize that there is life going on. People live, and it's a different kind of world, and it's nice to see that, as I said, there is a different culture and different ways of life, and they are happy there. You would be just unable to survive, most people, for a long time in those places, for maybe, but
okay, so you mentioned Erbil in Kurdistan. What did you like about that city?
As I said, I walked through the streets, and there were that was just so dirty, the streets, and it's amazing, all the bad smells, and there are people cutting a cow, the head, and the same was in Kyrgyzstan as well. The heads of sheep are going around, and you realize it's just so strange. It's a different environment. Or in Laos, you go to the market, you have all these animals going around. It's not like what you see going to a supermarket at home. And so it's the contrast that I like. It's seeing that there are other ways of life. And I got to talk with, of course, a lot of different people. And so they came, and I'm traveling alone as a woman. And some men just came and wanted their photo taken. And I was curious if they would want money for it, for example. They didn't, because that's not a touristic place. But in touristic places, it's every kind of interaction. You need to be careful what people might be asking for you, or if they are being friendly because they are friendly, or if they want something from you. And that was true in Iraq, I believe. And in Iran as well. I was just amazed at the hospitality of the people, just wanting to help you.
And Gulen, you've had some scary moments on the road. You touched on a couple of them: getting bit by a dog, overturning a truck you were driving, a uncomfortable attack on a boat. What's one of your more scary, uncomfortable, unsafe moments during your time on the road?
Well, that would be the Iran trip, actually. As I said, I had very good people hosting me in their homes and offering me all kinds of help. But in Iran, I believe it's a place of contrast. I was on this shared taxi in daylight, and I was of course covered, but of course it's obvious that I am not from them, because the way I'm covered is different. And I had my backpack with me, but it was going to be a short ride. But I sat in the middle at the back of the taxi. After 2 minutes, the man on my right started pushing his leg towards my leg. And I said, okay, this is not normal. And I always carry a safety pin with me. And I took out the safety pin and stuck it in him so that he would take his leg away from me. But then this time he took his leg away, but he started touching me touching my arm to look at. And then in the end, I turned around and I saw that he had just opened up his zipper and showing his penis at me. I felt like I raised my arm and I was about to slap the man. And then I said to myself, Gülin, come to your senses. I mean, this is Iran. You are traveling as a woman alone. It's daylight, and I mean, I'm all covered. There isn't anything suggestive about that. But, you go to the police station and who knows what will happen. So I just put my hand back. And anyway, we had just arrived. As I said, it was a 10-minute ride or something. But I was just, okay, even in such a country, what things like that can happen.
So, and just so I understand, you were in a shared taxi, so there's 5 other people in there, or what do we have?
Yeah, 4 other people. The driver, somebody in the front, and then two people on my right and left.
And no one else noticed this man, or what was going on? And no one came to your help or defense?
No, because I was sitting with my backpack in the center, so the man on my left didn't really realize it because my backpack was blocking, and I was blocking his way. And as I said, nothing happened. He just walked away.
So major sense of relief running out of that taxi when you got to the destination. So glad that turned out as best as possible. But
it was also that in Iran, I also met the most innocent man, may I say, because, I went to a girls' school for 4 years, and then I studied co-ed for 4 years, and then I was the only girl in mechanical engineering. So I'm into man stuff. I know that stuff as well. And when I was again in Iran traveling, I was on a bench waiting for a bus and reading my book. And some guy sat next to me. And I looked around. There were other benches, all empty. And I said, what is this guy? And he was just a university student. He started talking. He wanted to speak English. There are always these people. And then he said, can I hold your hand? And I first thought, why should I let him hold my hand? And then I realized, it's just so normal for a young man to want to hold a girl's hand, and they cannot do it. And I gave it, and I said, what is it? So we are in daylight, and there are people going around, and it was just 5 minutes, and then I left. And then he sent me a bracelet, for example. He got my address, and that was a nice thing as well, nice interaction. So
that sounds a lot more positive than the shared taxi. So good to see you had some pleasant experiences as well. What about a overrated place? So somewhere that everybody's like, cool, and you got to go here, or you've been reading about it in the guidebooks and you got there and you're like, what's all the excitement about?
Well, as I said, I guess I'd be saying Thailand.
Okay.
I understand the excitement, but it's so polluted and so noisy, and
so a lot of hype and too many tourists. Too much.
Actually, it's very easy to travel, and it's so crowded for a reason, and it has a lot to offer, of course. But people were just saying, they are so friendly, always smiling. But I found that they are sort of after money, and capitalism has gotten. I'm not saying this in a negative way because it's just normal, I suppose. But as I said, I didn't feel. Many of my friends just love those places, and many people love India. And as I said, I understand what it is about, but it's just those places are not for me.
Where have you been where you said, I'm all alone? So somewhere so off the beaten path, so solitaire. You have a place like that?
Well, I cannot think of now. There probably were places. I might say Erbil or in places in Northwest Africa. Yes, I know. I went to South Africa, and then I went to. Remind me now. I'm just. What is the small places around there?
Swaziland,
Kingdom in
Lesotho.
Kingdom, yes. Kingdom in the Sky, Swaziland and Lesotho. They said that it was the time for tourists, and I was just thinking, where are the backpackers around here, Lesotho and Swaziland? And I was just the only white person around in the streets, and I just didn't see anybody around in those places when I visited.
Is that a positive thing? Do you like that isolation and lack of tourism, or?
Yeah, I like it. It felt a bit strange, but I like it. Everybody sees you and notices you. For example, you sit in a restaurant and somebody comes and talks, starts chatting with you, and then they say, I saw you here walking or doing that. So you are spotted, but I like that. I like being alone and being off the beaten path that no, not everybody goes. I mean, of course, people travel there. It's not that I was, but when I went there, I was the only one.
Okay. Gulen, what about a I don't do this at home experience? So in other words, sometimes when you're overseas and you're seeing what the locals are doing or maybe other tourists are doing would never take place back home, but overseas it does. So for instance, jumping in the ocean to go swim with 50 sharks, or going to Harar, Ethiopia, and feeding a hyena out of your mouth with some meat. Or there's the famous Sakyent festival in Thailand where 10,000 people and some of them get possessed and start acting very irrational and start rushing the stage and screaming and yelling and taking on the forms of animals. Where's an experience or a place that you've had, I don't see this back home?
You are talking that I saw something special that I wouldn't see at home, or that I did myself that I don't do?
Either or.
Well, in Peru, I dressed up. I don't go dancing, and one night I dressed up with their local clothes, and we had a night out. And once in Rio, that was an amazing night for me as well. I went out in the market and I bought something. I wanted to buy something, but I didn't have the money on me because everybody said Rio is a dangerous place. You don't go out with anything but just a little amount of money on yourself, not wearing a watch or anything. And the woman said, no, you take these and you come and bring the money afterwards. I mean, to me, it's wrong, She keeps them for me. I pay whatever money I have, and then I give it the money. I said, okay. But then I went back to my hostel, picked the money up, and paid the woman. And the woman was just packing up. It was 11 o'clock, I suppose, at night. And she said that she was going to go to a nightclub, and I never go to nightclubs as well. I said, there's a local woman inviting me to a nightclub, and this was the time that I had just started speaking Spanish. And she was from somewhere else in South America. So I said, okay. And we went, and she introduced me to gay friends, and it was just all crowded and noisy. And we had a long chat in Spanish, and that was just so exciting for me. And I saw all these fireworks jumping around. And at night, it was, of course, 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and I was going back. I had to go back now. And I was saying, okay, this is a place, again, during daylight, there are people put a knife on buses, and things like that happen. But she just introduced me to a driver on a bus, and she told the guy to leave me in some place. So it was nice, and it was a very amazing night for me that I never do at home.
Well, it sounds like a very fun night that your mother would not approve.
Yeah, exactly. My mother would not approve many of the things that I do anyway. Okay. I gave up on that.
Let's talk about visas.
Yeah.
And let's talk about a challenging visa that you got or maybe didn't get. So a visa nightmare challenge story.
Yeah, I have many of those stories, actually.
Okay.
As I said,
pick one of your favorites.
I will pick the Canadian visa because that was the only visa I was refused. I've been to all these 110 something countries at that point, and I know what it means to get a visa. But then at that point, I was settled here in Italy, and I had residence, and I was married to an Italian man, and I had applied for citizenship. I was going to, and at that point, they changed the passports with the machine readable ones, and I got a new passport. And we went to the Canadian embassy. We had this planned trip to go to Alaska. We had paid all our dues, and because that's a short term. Anyway, and I told my husband applied because we live in the countryside in Rome, and that's the city center, and my husband goes to work. I said, you take all these old passports as well, because to show that I am a traveler, apart from all the other things that they ask apart from the form. He applied, and then, of course, I had to go and pick it up myself. And I went, and I got the passport in an envelope, and I just looked over the pages, and then I couldn't see the visa. Where is the visa? And I looked around again. There's no visa. And I pulled out some papers, and it said, visa denied. And luckily, they wrote the reasons. They said, no previous travel history. And I just thought to myself, and my husband wanted to give all the old passports, and the woman who took the application pushed them back to him, saying that they didn't need them. And in that form, in the Canadian visa application form, they asked about my stepsisters, sisters, brothers, and half sisters and brothers. And I first didn't get what is stepsister and half brother and sister. Then I figured out stepsister is when none of your parents are in common, or half sister and brother are one in common. At that point, I wasn't talking to my father, but I knew he was married and the woman had children, but I didn't even know their names. And they asked for their place of birth and what they worked and whatever, all that kind of information, but they didn't ask about my travel history. And they didn't. And then, I mean, how can a consulate, they ask if they have an point of making, okay, if there's somebody has not traveled, they are going to refuse a visa, they should at least ask that on the form or ask for old passports. And then, of course, luckily, I was just, because I couldn't apply and we had this flight, I went back and I reapplied with all my paperworks as well. And I showed them and I was given, of course, a visa. But I was 5.5 months pregnant at the time, and it was a very, very stressful trip.
I can imagine. Can you touch on for a moment, you've traveled on a Turkish passport and you've traveled on an Italian passport. Obviously, the Italian is much more powerful, much more highly ranked. So can you touch for a minute on traveling between the two and, the difference between?
Well, actually, yeah, it is powerful. It depends on the places that you want to go. If you want to go to Iran or Lebanon, for example, or Saudi Arabia for that matter, you don't travel with the Italian passport. I went to Saudi Arabia and I visited Mecca as well. So I was lucky in that sense. And people cannot go there. And I couldn't probably go there if I had the Italian visa. And going into Lebanon, I was just reminding myself, just keep in mind that you are going to present your Turkish passport to the immigration officer, not the Italian one. And I feel strange, going out, I have to use my Italian passport going out of Italy because they want to know how you have been here in this country. And I have this now switch back and forth, and who am I with this identity? Am I Turkish or Italian? I am the same person. I haven't changed, but it depends on who I am interacting with.
That's true. Yeah. So it sounds like you have a lot of flexibility using both. And as you pointed out, some have strengths in one area versus the other. So that's great to have that flexibility.
Exactly.
What is your rule for visiting a country? Everybody has their own different rule. Is it a visa stamp, tapping your foot over the border? Is it transiting through an airport, or is it sleeping over for 24 hours?
Well, I don't have a special rule, but I would never do an airport turnaround. I mean, that's not traveling. But if I stay a day and visit and walk around, as I said, to me, it's just walking the earth and leaving my step and walking around and interacting with people. Just seeing or smiling is enough for me as well. And breathing the air, because it gives you an idea of the place. Sometimes my husband criticizes me because I don't stay too long in many of the places that I go, because I cannot right now. But to me, I know I have an idea of the places as an avid traveler, as I have traveled so much. It gives me an idea what I want, where I want to return to, and where I would probably be visiting maybe years later on.
Throw a country that you would love to revisit again, one of the ones up top ranked.
I would like to go to Argentina and live there, and I would like to go to Mexico, and I would like to go to Malawi and Ethiopia.
Okay. Travel, is it a competition? Do you feel like you're competing against others in the community?
No, I'm not. I am not that kind of a person. I think everybody is to himself or to herself what satisfies her. So I basically, you know that I have an issue with some of the travelers, but that's not because of what they do. It's because of what they say and how they reflect travel.
Okay, that's a good segue because you are a prolific writer. You have your own website, which we'll talk about, where you've shared a lot of writings. There's a group on Facebook called Every Passport Stamp where you're a big contributor, sharing a lot of thoughts and comments on that. So I did a little research. One person you commented about, I think you wrote on your blog, talking about Jessica Nabongo. Jessica is an American woman whose stated goal is to be the first Black woman to travel to every country in the world. And she is also going to be traveling at somewhat of a fast pace to, I believe, finish her goal before she's 35 years old.
Yeah.
So quoting from your blog, you write, "I have no respect at all for this. I'll be telling you why. First of all, I see it as depreciating women in travel. Second, it's a pissing match with no content. Third, and most importantly, it's a game, a big ego here."
Yes.
So comment on that and what your thoughts are on sort of a competitor traveler trying to break a record or be the first.
If you repeat my reasons, I'll be telling you one by one. What did I say?
Well, you said, yep, I know how you feel. I write a lot of stuff and I forget about it.
Yes.
So, and you don't have to touch on everyone, but just a general feedback, depreciating women in travel, pissing match, it's a game.
Depreciating women and travel, I'll tell you why. It's because of the photos she shares on Facebook and from an interview she had on Business Insider, I suppose. She said, "I have deep and intense knowledge of the world." To say something like that, you have to have something to back that up. You cannot just shoot it up out of your head. And I go to her website to see what her deep and intense knowledge is, and I see, I'm sorry, but half naked and photos and whatever. So that's what she shares. I would like to know what she learns or what she got from all her travels. It's not about... So that's why I feel that she's depreciating women and travel. I've said that the same thing about Lexi as well. I'm sorry. That's how I feel. And it's a game. It is a game for us. And I feel, I know it's a nice game. I would like, I mean, once you get into it, as I said, that was not my travel to go to every country. I didn't start off with this thing, but it is a nice thing. But the thing is, travel is a matter of life and death for so many people. And I have an issue with Jessica, especially because she said, I'm a Black African woman as well. Yes, okay. I understand that being Black has disadvantages as well. But being an Afghani or a Pakistani has more disadvantages. They cannot travel. Jessica has an American passport, and she says she would be using her whatever it is, the other the African passport as well.
Uganda, I believe.
I believe Uganda as well. But later she said that she'd be using that to promote the idea of Africans traveling. But later, please go to Equatorial Guinea with that passport and see how she gets the visa. She won't be able to do it. And the ego is, it's not my word, because she said it in another podcast. She said, a little bit of ego here. So that was her words that I was reflecting. I didn't get it out of myself. And I said,
okay,
it's not a...
Okay.
Okay.
And let's touch on Lexi, since you mentioned her as well. Lexi is a former guest of Counting Countries as well. She's trying to become the youngest person to travel to every country in the world. And you wrote a comment, I think you had her Instagram photo, and you said, sorry, but is this pool photo in a bikini really necessary? Is it mandatory? It sure seems to be so, given it's part of every woman's profile who comes out with the news of going to every country. And then you write under her photo, Lexi and her nipples. So what's going through your mind when you're critiquing one of her photos?
Because, as I said, it's personal. I'm telling you, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that these people, Jessica, got all those interviews and whatever, and I cannot get any attention. I confess. So basically, and the thing is, as I said, women, to me, with these photos and things, I'm not criticizing Lexi that much because she's too young. But I'm criticizing, and what is her website motto? How can you change the world if you haven't seen it? It's not about that. She doesn't really, I didn't know anything about the world until my 30s or 40s, okay? But the thing is, it's a good thing what she is doing. I'm not criticizing her. It's a good thing that she sees the world. But to give it out as if she knows a lot or whatever, or just like Jessica, I've been to all these places and I lived in so many countries without any substantial matter, the substantial writing or thing to back it up. It just seems wrong to me, and I feel that. And I also wrote it in my post. I don't have this issue with most of the male travelers, with Gunnar Garfers, for example. I don't have that issue with him because he's just fine. He goes for the Guinness records. It's fine. It's just people going out for boys going out and challenging themselves. But with this kind of photo, that's what the media wants, and that's what they use it. And I don't really approve of it. I think we need more strong women and with a different kind of women profile to be more prominent in the world.
Okay, and let's touch a little bit on Cassie Derpakol, who was named, controversially named the first documented woman to travel to every country in the world. And there's a lot of controversy in our travel community about her. Mm-hmm. But I also noted you had some thoughts on Janice Lintz. So Janice wrote an article,
yes,
in essence, critiquing Cassie Derpakol and her claim of being the first woman to travel to every country in the world. And Janice wrote an article, I think, in Huffington Post,
exactly,
explaining how the media is spreading fake news about Cassie's record. And you wrote an article on your blog, mm-hmm, basically criticizing Janice Lintz,
exactly,
attacking Cassie Derpakol. Touch on that.
Exactly. I don't think Janice has any point with her article, and I wrote my points. And if she claims that Cassie is not the first documented woman, she has to show someone who is first documented. I'm not saying, and Cassie is not saying, that the other people, the other women did not travel to every country beforehand, but she's the first documented. And I don't know why these women, especially, also, I have to say the same thing about Petro as well. Why is it so difficult for them to accept, to give Cassie even that she's the first documented woman, and because the others are not documented? Petro gave as an example on an argument. Listen to the postcat and read who was the German.
Nina
Sedano. Read her book. I mean, a book is not a document. Guinness is the authority on documentation. And I'm sorry, Cassie is, and there is the first documented woman. And I don't believe there should be any controversy about it. That's
okay. Good point. So you're basically saying, you write, or you're quoting Janice Lintz in her article, talking about Dorothy Pines, who might be the first woman to travel to every country in the world. Mm-hmm. And Janice used Dorothy Pines' obituary as the research.
Exactly. Okay. My point.
And your point is saying an obituary is not necessarily proof that she had traveled to every country in the world.
Exactly. I'm not saying she didn't travel. She's not the first woman, but it's not documentation. That doesn't prove anything. Anybody can write in an obituary that she did this or did that.
Okay. And not that we're picking on all the women. I'm going to end with one man that you pointed out. So Graham Hughes is, he has stated he's the first person to travel to every country in the world without using an airplane.
Yeah.
Graham stated, I visited every nation in the world without flying for water aid because access to clean water should be a human right. I think we all agree with that, and that would be a great thing. But your comment was, sorry, he didn't visit every nation for that. He did it for his ego. Really? Is Graham still promoting that message? Is he trying to do anything about that topic?
Thank you for pointing out my lines. I mean, yes, I still believe, I agree with that. That's the point. I mean, for example, I am, as I said, after that point, I am traveling to every country to burn my passport, to protest global apartheid or injustice at birth, or birthplace racism, whatever you call it. But I'm not, I am doing this for that. But, and I won't be stopping going about the freedom of movement when I finish this thing. I mean, it's not a bad thing that, okay, he got sponsorships and made money for that. In itself, it's not bad. It's a matter of give and take and publicity. Unfortunately, that's important. But I don't find the way Graham writes things in his blog and the way he shoots back, for example, the way he visited North Korea. You do every capital city in the world like that. I mean, I understand those reactions, but I mean, I haven't met him, so maybe he's a nice, I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad person, but you know that Thor is now doing the same thing without breaking his trip. But to me,
and what did you mean by Graham in North Korea?
He just went to North Korea, stepping from the
joint security area, Parmesan Village. He entered one of the buildings and stepped over the line.
Exactly, from the demilitarized zone, he did it, and he just counts it. It's 2 minutes or whatever it is. He can't. I mean,
would you count that personally?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, if I could, I would go. I mean, but for example, that I don't know how I'll be going to Equatorial Guinea. If it is not possible to go any other way or whatever it is, if I am blocked, for example, if it is my last country or whatever, I would do it and consider it done. I mean, for example, I've been to Erbil, as I said, I count it as Iraq, but I would like to go to Baghdad as well. But I went to Erbil because I didn't need a visa to go to Erbil. And now I need a visa even to go to Erbil. But one day I would like to go to Baghdad as well. It's, you know, it depends on your situation and your goals, of course.
So looking at the travel community or even going back into history, any role models for travel, someone that you look up to, read about, check their blog?
Oyster Boy. I know what is his name, real name. It's sort of difficult.
Jacob Oster?
Jacob, yes.
Okay, so Jacob has appeared on the show. Jacob is from Denmark.
Yeah.
He's closing in on the 193, and he also does a ton of travel with his partner and 2 very young children. Yeah, so what do you admire about Jacob?
No, I like the way he writes. It's, you know, it's human, and he's as well like Gunnar, as I said. Gunnar's webpage is very nice. I believe I check some of his writings. But the thing is, it's, you know, he says he wanted to be the first to travel as a, I mean, I don't remember now, but Jacob wanted
You're referring to Jacob.
Yeah, but then he found out that somebody else did it, and then he wanted to be the first to do whatever, and then he realized somebody else did it too. Now he wants to be the first with a family, but he says he doesn't mind. I mean, it's nice, of course, to be the first. For example, like I said, I was the first to visit, first Turkish woman to go around the world backpacking. It's nice, but these are not special things. It's what you do. It's the experience for yourself. It's not to be the first, I believe. So I like that part of what Jacob and about Gunners as well. So it's
so. Are you going to be when you complete this goal? Are you going to be the first Turkish woman to accomplish this goal, as far as you know?
Well, I probably am going to be, but the thing is, of course, how would you, if you would count me, because now I'm also using my Italian passport to travel to some places. Would it count if you traveled on a second passport, or do you have to be traveling with only the Turkish passport? So,
well, there's no governing board on that, so you'll probably be able to state.
I think Turkish. I will be the first Italian woman as well. I don't think any Italian woman is after going to every country.
Two birds with one stone, so you'll be in good shape.
Yes.
Talk to me about finishing up the goal. So 2 year, you've set the goal for 2 years. Mm-hmm. What's your biggest challenge from your perspective of finishing this up?
I think it would be Equatorial Guinea right now, because I tried a couple of places and I found that somebody said that I could get it in Brazzaville, and I went there to the consulate and I could get it, but they asked for 300 euros. And instead, Chris Sutherland, who is also going to every country, had got it for 100. And I didn't want to pay that much bribe. I mean, bribes are fine if they get you along, but
but let me understand that better. You flew all the way down to Brazzaville.
No, I was already going down there, and I was traveling in Kinshasa as well, and whatever. And then we were just chatting, and he said he had been to Ecuador, and I said, "How did you get in? And how did you get your visa?" And I was also even in Cameroon. He said that many people got it from Douala. But I was in Yaoundé and I wasn't sure if they would be giving me the visa, and I didn't want to go to Douala just to waste mine. But I said, okay, since you got it in Brazzaville and I'm going to be going there, I get it in Brazzaville, no problem. But it didn't turn out that way. Either the woman didn't like me. She was a very gorgeous, nicely dressed, poshy woman. And I was just, the backpacker dirty. She probably thought, what is this? Is this what kind of a woman? Or I don't know, whatever.
But obviously 300 euros is a lot of money, and it's irritating to hear someone did it for 100. Yeah. Isn't it worth biting the bullet and getting that visa when you're in the neighborhood and your goal is 195?
Yeah, I mean, I thought about that too. But the thing is, if I had got that visa right then, I had to fly back or continue my trip. And, I have a family. Then I was away for more than 2 weeks anyway at the time, about 20 days. So I couldn't really continue. And I had to go back and rush back quickly. So that wasn't really so optimum for me. And I said, I still have many other countries to go. And along the way, they will be changing rules, or I will find a way, and we think about it when the time comes.
And Gulin, looking out a couple of years, hopefully accomplishing your goal, do you envision what your last country is? Is there a plan in terms of what the last one will be?
I actually thought about that, but I really couldn't come up with any country. Maybe it could be Libya or Equatorial Guinea. Who knows? Who knows what?
And besides the burning of the passports, is there any other celebration or way that you would mark the end of completing your goal?
Well, I don't think so. I have my 50th birthday coming up. I wanted to actually, just like this, Jessica wants to do it on her 35th. I thought about completing it on my 50th birthday. That would have been a very nice thing. But, it's going to be too much of a rush, and I don't want to do that. So we have to think of something other nice plans to do it.
Cool. You've mentioned newspapers quite a bit. You've mentioned books. It sounds like you are a minor travel celebrity in Turkey. Can you touch on your status as a travel media person in your home country?
Let's say I was once upon a time, until I came up with this burning of the passports. And now they just avoid me, and they didn't even publish anything about my third round the world travel with my family, 3.5 years old daughter. And we returned on my daughter's 4th birthday. And, it's people do not do these travels, and I'm definitely worth the news, especially at least in Turkey, as a third round the world tour. And as I said, I have a story meeting my husband on my Italian husband on a second round the world tour. So I thought that these newspapers would be publishing my story, whatever it is, because I am a story, right?
So you think in essence you got blackballed because you were pushing the concept of no borders and burning passports?
Exactly, I think so. But I mean, to my surprise, I was invited to a radio show on Turkish radio and television, and of course, and I did some interviews. They just talk about it up to a point. Of course, they don't want to really mention burning passports, but they just mention things about being unfair and just passing through the world, and that things should be more equal. And so I understand them as well. They are corporate magazines and things, so they cannot really take up this point. But at least, even if not, I don't want to be on the travel section anymore. I believe I have a place, at least in the political agenda. Even talking to my friends, I realize that most people are not aware of what the world is, how other people live, because they haven't traveled, because they have no idea how other people live or how things work in other countries. So, but unfortunately, I couldn't break it. Maybe I couldn't find the right person. I'm sure there are people out there who would be sponsoring me, but not with, because, sponsorship is about numbers and advertisement. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not going to get them news or whatever. So we see what comes out.
I've quoted from your blog a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
How can people keep in touch with you and read about your travels and thoughts?
I have a website, gulin.world, and I have Twitter and Facebook account and LinkedIn, but I'm not on the social media. But anybody who contacts me through my website, I give answers and respond to them. So my website is gulin.world.
Excellent. There'll be a link to that in the show notes as well, so you can check out her writings. Gulin, I want to thank you very much. Thank you for joining me and sharing your amazing stories and challenges and victories. I want to wish you a ton of success as you close in on the goal of your 195, and keep all of us up to date on the movement of burning your passport.
Thank you very much, Ric. Thanks for the invitation.
Thanks to Gulin for joining me on Counting Countries today. I want to wish her a lot of luck and success in pursuing the 193 and some success in burning her passport. Check out the show notes on globalgaz.com about more information about Gulin and how you can stay in touch with her and read a lot of her thoughts on travel and travelers. Finally, I'd love your help. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment and leave a review wherever you listen to Counting Countries. And take a look at our t-shirt, the Counting Countries t-shirt on Amazon.com. Until next time, safe travels and keep on counting countries.
You have been listening to Counting Countries, the only podcast to bring you the stories from the dedicated few who've spent their lives on the singular quest of traveling to every country in the world. Our theme music is Demeter's Dance, written, performed, and provided by Mundi. Get their entire discography at mundiworld.com, mundiworld.com. And keep up with Ric and his own personal travel quests at globalgaz.com.